content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families. On June 9, 1912, in Villisca, Iowa, the Moore family was making their way back home around 9:30 p.m. from a children's program at the local church. Katherine Moore's friends, Ina and Lena Stillinger, were attending with the Moore family at the church, and they made their way back there to spend the night. Seems like any other summer evening in the Midwest. They're all washed up and said their prayers before laying their heads down to sleep. Little did they know that they would never wake up that night. One of the most gruesome unsolved cases in American history, the Villisca Ax Murderer murdered the entire Moore family along with the two friends of Katherine, Ina, and Lena. A murder so random, yet a murder scene filled with such rage that left the Midwest just terrified. What would possess somebody to randomly mutilate an entire family with an axe? Or was it as random as we thought? Tonight, we'll explore the possibilities, suspects, and motives and try and get some answers, even if those answers come from beyond the grave, with our special guest, Johnny Hauser. It's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader, and tonight I want to explore a case that, well, gosh, they have those one cases that just keep you up at night. The unsolved ones, the ones that are just so random that make no sense at all. Well, the big one that comes to mind is the Villisca Ax Murder house. And we really can't grasp what really happened. I mean, we know what happened, but who did it? Why did they do it? And with evidence lost and stuff, sometimes we have to rely on some more unconventional ways of finding out the truth. And that's why I have my special guest, Johnny Hauser. Johnny Hauser, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, so you kind of come from the paranormal side of things, but how did you get into the paranormal, and how does that tie to the Villisca Ax Murderer house?
So, growing up, I was like every weird kid. I can remember seeing the commercial of Time Life Mysteries of the Unexplained book series, and I begged my mom to get copies of that. But back in those days, I was very much a UFO, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, crypto guy, which turned into ghosts probably about the time I came to the Axe house. But in between all that, I was very true crime nut. Like I am a true crime nerd, and I'm not one of these people that think serial killers are cool. It's to me what made Ed Gein decide to wear a skin suit around the house. Like, what's the
It's the
tipping point?
psychology of it. Yeah, it's
Yes,
just like,
and
why?
and I actually went to college for I was wanting to get into forensic psychology. Because when I was in seventh or probably sixth grade, I checked out this book from the library called A Child Called It by David Peltzer. This horribly abused child locked in a dog kennel, cigarette butts put out on him. I mean, the worst you can imagine. This kid's fine. He didn't kill a bunch of people. If anyone should have killed a bunch of people, this kid should have, but He didn't. So that got
Mm-hmm.
me interested in why people do what they do. And then, of course, it went right off the bat to Charlie Manson, the
Yeah.
normals, to Ed Gein, Jeffrey Dahmer, Gacy, Ted Bundy, all the
Oh, it's a
usual suspects.
right. It's a rabbit hole. Trust me. I've been up many nights on YouTube going down those serial killer rabbit holes because you just want to know. You want answers. Why was it done? And like what would make somebody possess, like with the Villisca Ax murder, what would possess somebody to just go in and just hack up a whole family for there's like no reason or anything to it, no logic. So, and that's why I love true crime, and you and I are on the very same page of the true crime train. So,
Yeah, I fall asleep to Forensic Files at night. That narrator's voice is just like perfect.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
I know I do that too. When I can't sleep, I turn on Forensic Files.
And then I wonder why I'm depressed sometimes. I talk about true crime murders. I watch true crime. Like sometimes I just have to watch like Billy Madison and just laugh.
Yeah, you gotta clear that palate. Though I go to bed every night with Keith Morrison. I'm not gonna lie. I love Dateline. I listen to the podcast, but yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Sometimes you need to clean that palate. And I'm more of a Dave Chappelle. He's kind of my palate cleanser. And
perfect. That's a good one.
Pop an episode of that on, and I'm okay. I'm good to go.
Yes. It's yin and yang. You got to have balance.
Yeah. So, so you got in the paranormal. So you said that you really didn't get into the ghost side of things till you got to Villisca. What kind of drew you to Villisca and your introduction, I guess, to spirits and ghosts?
So I mean, kind of backing up a little bit. I mean, I feel like I was drawn to Villisca. It's like puzzle pieces being put together. I had ghostly activity as a child, but I was more into UFOs, because I've never seen, to this day, I've never seen a ghost, but I've for sure seen a UFO, I'll try and make it as quick as possible. Like when I was a little baby, my mom was doing laundry in this farmhouse, second story. She had the windows open, nice summer day. I crawled out the second story window and fell 2 stories down. Being a parent now, I can't imagine the horror of my mom's mind. She runs down. I was fine. Not even a scratch. They didn't even take me to the hospital. Right. And mom always goes, "Oh, the angels were watching over you." Maybe that's what's wrong with me today, the not going to the hospital. But so then another one of my first memories was this house I lived in. Me and my brother had bunk beds. I'd always wake up in the living room bawling my eyes out every night. And I have no idea how I got out there. Later on in that same house, my brother's best friend ended up going to prison, stabbing a lady 30 sometimes with a fork. Moved into other houses that had stuff happen. I can remember I was a little guitar player when I was 12 years old, and I had my amplifier on, my guitar on, and a wah pedal, which a wah pedal sweeps frequencies. It's like the beginning of Voodoo Child by Hendrix, that wow sound. Yeah. And had it in this up position, voices start coming out of my amplifier. And I'm like, what? It's like picking up a station or something. So my dad grabs a boombox, hits record, starts asking questions. We're doing a ghost box session in the 89, Wow. Well, we take this tape to different relatives and they would start crying. That's grandma's voice. I know that's grandma's voice. And it said something about Johnny car wreck. A week later, I got in a car wreck. So like right off the bat, I'm seeing how this is affecting other people, hearing spirit voices. But still, I'm out looking for Bigfoot tracks in Iowa.
Yeah, you can help it.
My first job was filling in graves at a cemetery. I mean, I went to a class reunion and everybody there is like, yeah, we knew you'd be doing something like this when you were. And like, Napoleon Dynamite, that movie?
Yeah.
Where he's doing the essay on Loch Ness Monster. And they're like, scientists are placing explosives that's looking, and everybody's laughing. I did that in the
Oh,
7th
you did.
grade,
Okay.
and it was
So
the
you were
same reaction.
Yeah, so yeah, you were kind of that kind of outcast kid, but now you're kind of the cool go-to ghost guy. So trust me, I was a nerd too. People didn't understand why I liked the stuff that I did. I'm
Mhm.
like a sci-fi nerd, and I was a tomboy, but I stayed true to myself, and so did
Right.
you. And look where it's gotten you. I mean, you're happy doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
and you can't ask for a better life than that. So hey,
Right.
power to you. Keep doing what you're doing. You just be you, Johnny. You just
I,
be
I, what else am I going to do? you know? Um, so then I was a musician out in Nashville for about 15 years, and not a lot of people that know me know that. I mean, there's YouTube
I didn't
videos.
know that.
Yeah, there's YouTube videos floating around of me in a cowboy hat
Oh.
on a stage doing country, which,
Oh, I'm gonna have to do some rabbit hole
yeah,
on YouTube for that, Johnny.
yeah. So, ended up meeting my now ex-wife, which sounds like a country song, in a city. And
Hmm.
at that point, is like if my drummer slurps his pop one more time, I'm nose diving out of this bus. Like, just too much of being with the same people every day.
Yeah.
So she wanted to move to Villisca, where her family's from. Right
Hmm.
off the bat, I'm like, oh, the Axe Murder house, from my true crime background. I
Hmm.
came and asked Darwin, who owned the house, every day. I'm asking him questions. And he goes, do you just want a job? You're here every day. I might as well pay you to do something. And that's how it started. That's
Oh,
how,
that's cool.
but it's like just stepping stones. And then all of a sudden, I get a job here. And back in those
Hmm.
days, it was nothing. But the house next door opens up. And I'm like, you better snatch that up before somebody's revving their car or knocking at the doors and ruining the Axe Murder house overnights.
Hmm.
And I mean, this is right when taps came on. Nobody's doing overnights, you know?
Yeah.
So then I end up moving next door to Mary Peckham's house, which was the lady that found them. And I mean, it's just like meant to be here, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, there's places that I'm drawn to as well. And, sometimes I was drawn to the Palmer House in Minnesota. For some reason, I had never been there. And finally, I went to an event that Dave was having there. And, next thing I know, I'm Dave's wife.
Mm-hmm.
So, it could be very well like this is where you're meant to be. And obviously, you're happy doing it. So, now that you're here and you're working for this, what was your goal, I guess? What were you hoping to find out? Were you looking at it as a more of a paranormal aspect, or are you coming in wanting the job as a more of a armchair detective?
Armchair detective for sure. So,
Okay.
and just a quick thing, I have so many stories, I forget half of them.
Oh, don't worry
Um,
about it.
I was going through old photographs. My mom lived out in Arkansas, mom and dad do, and she's almost OCD with her photographs. She has from the 60s on up, chronological order. And I'm looking how dumb I looked in the 80s, and I find a picture of the Axe house. And I'm like,
Okay.
what is this? And she looks at the back. She goes, oh, you're like 10 years old, and he insisted we drive by there so he could take a picture of it. I don't remember any of that. Why would I care? You know,
Right. Yeah. It's not like it's a side show. Well, now
nobody
it's
even knew
kind of
about
a
it
attract.
back then. You
Right,
know,
right. It
nobody
wasn't
talked
like
about
a
it.
place. Yeah, it wasn't like a sideshow attraction that, hey, I
Right.
want to go see the big ball of twine. I mean,
Yeah.
back then, Villisca it was not the business that it is today. So,
And so,
you were drawn to it even as a child.
and right off the bat is like from a detective standpoint, I went to the library and I asked as many
Uh-huh.
questions as I could in there. And this old lady goes, take this key, go to the basement, unlock this door. And I'm like, what is happening? I do this, and there's all these boxes, and it's all the
Hmm.
old handwritten detective notes. And I'm like,
Oh, cool.
and I poured through every one of those notes. I read F.F. Jones, who was a suspect. I thumbed through his personal Bible, read 20 years of letters he wrote his daughter in New York, like poured through all of it. Because my thought was, I watch every forensic file. I can solve this. These old
Right.
detectives were dumb. But what I
Yeah.
figured out was these old detectives were like Sherlock Holmes type
Hmm.
guys. They looked at crossed every T, dotted every I, so I just started really going down the rabbit hole of detective standpoint, but then TV shows start coming out and they start coming to the Axe house, and pretty soon I'm like, there's people with matching black t-shirts that investigate ghosts. Like I had no idea. It's like there's teams with walkie-talkies and
I know, you're like, is this Ghostbusters? What's going on? Because I mean, back then paranormal TV was just starting. So it wasn't like a huge known thing like it is today. So you start getting these TV groups coming in and wanting to do overnights and ghost investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So did you feel like, why are they doing that? Did you have a correlation to see like maybe they're reaching out in an unconventional way to help solve the murders?
My first thoughts were just like, I thought I was the only weirdo, I thought it was just me. And then it was just like, all these other people do it. So then I have a million questions. Like, I am very much of, no matter what you do in your life, you can always learn from people. And what's unique about my situation, and I'm very humbled by, is the people that I'm asking how to ghost hunt and theories, just getting started. It's Paranormal State, Ghost Adventure, Ghost Lab, Dead Files, Kindred Spirits, Destiny, like all these TV show people. I'm like, so what's this mean? What's, like, that's who I learned from. So it never was, we're going to solve the case. It was more of, holy crap, this is real.
Right.
But quickly, like, people would go in and, I command you, tell me who did the murders. And I'm like, or what? What are you going to do? I command you. But then people were getting different names that nobody's ever heard of. Oh, it was Jack Smith. He did it. I was like, who's Jack Smith?
Right.
So I always pour through those notes once a year, which incidentally, they're all gone now. I don't know where they went. But
oh no,
all these names people were getting throughout 2 or 3 year period were random townspeople's names. They were all people that lived in this town. And so right off the bat, I'm like, whatever's in here is just messing with people, just throwing out random names, but they're names of people who lived in town at the time, which is super creepy.
Ghost is reading the white pages of Villisca.
Right. And so and Darwin would always go, oh, you roll a ball, the kids will roll one back to you. I never got that vibe from the house ever. And I make a lot of ex-house purists mad with this. I don't think the family's ever been there. I think it's something totally different.
You think it's something totally different? Yeah.
For sure.
I would love that's one of my bucket places. I do want to go and do an investigation. Because I'm also an empath. And when I do ghost investigations, I base everything off of feelings. So I'm kind of drawn to that and I think it's because I'm a mother and there's a lot of children.
Right.
Children. Gotta love them. Just me being a mother, I connect with children's spirits. So, they're very strong when I'm around them. So maybe I could try and pick something up, because if I don't get any children there, obviously, then the children aren't there. So,
and I also think, like, the house gives you it's like rose red. It's like reflects back to you what you put into it. If you're looking for kids, you're going to get kids. If you're looking for the come at me bro thing, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's this like a very, very Amityville too. Like a lot of the people are like, so-and-so got in a fight with so-and-so. It's like the house tried splitting the team up. And this story is very common of what comes from the house. Had a guy by himself, gets an EVP of a woman saying a woman's name. And I'm like, that doesn't ring a bell historically. I'll have to do some research. He goes, no, that was my girlfriend's name 33 years ago in Texas, who's still alive. Next night, YouTubers from Maryland, name from their past, super personal. To me, that's something in the house going, I know everything about you, and I want you to know I know everything about you. which is very
Okay, so
sinister.
yeah, malevolent. Now, with the history of the Villisca house, what's kind of the history of it? I mean, it's kind of painted as this mecca of a murder, but a family lived there. It was just a small, rural town in Iowa. So, what's the history of the Villisca house?
So basically, June 9th, 1912, town had a church service, which got over about 10 p.m. It was like an end of Bible school event. The
Okay.
Moores come home with Ina and Lena Stillinger, two friends, and they actually had two other little boys walking with them. They went home last second.
Okay.
Ina and Lena stayed the night because it's dark. The plan was her school teacher was going to meet them out front the next morning and walk them home. This is about 10 miles or so. Next morning, Mary Peckham, the neighbor's up at 5 a.m. doing her laundry, and by 8:30, she's just like, something's not right here. So she gets Ross Moore, a relative, to use his key. He finds Ina, well, he walks into the downstairs bedroom, sees two bodies in the bed with a sheet covering. He runs out and says something terrible has happened. That ended up being Ina and Lena Stillinger. So the authorities come down, they go upstairs, find 6 more bodies, the entire Moore family. So you got 8 total, 6 kids, sadly, 2 adults. Everyone's in bed. Sheets covering the bodies. The axe is left downstairs, bacon on the floor, mirrors covered with sheets, food at the table, bloody water, cigarette butts, footprints. All that's destroyed by half the town now walking around in the house. And they say half the town, but back then it was 4,000 people. I doubt there were 2,000, but even if it's a fourth of that, it's an enormous amount of people in the crime scene.
Right.
At one point, the medical examiner's in there going, will you get these people out of here? Like, what are you doing? And the cop goes, as soon as I push them out the front, they come in the back. National Guard got deployed to get control over everything. It was that outrageous.
Wow.
And
That's
so, detective from Kansas City shows up. He's drunk. So that's where that starts.
Good choice.
Next day, they sober him up and they proceed to question people in town looking for motive. And that went on for 5 years. So the idea of there being 3 or 4 suspects, every podcast, every TV show, every documentary focus on F.F. Jones, Andy Sawyer, Blackie Mansfield, because it's state senator, schizophrenic minister, killer from a train. The guy that owned the shoe store is a suspect, but killer from the train, shoe store. Like, that's not exciting for television.
No.
But
the guy
the truth,
takes everybody's souls, literally.
Right. The truth of the matter is, it was 5 years of gossip in a small town about a murder. Everyone was looked at. Everyone was a suspect.
Right. And when the crime scene is being contaminated by everybody, especially then, the police knew that they were limited on evidence because, how can you they didn't know the DNA. They did do fingerprints at that time, I believe. But, the lack of the scientific evidence we have today that could probably would have pinpointed a suspect right away. They have to do a lot more legwork. So when you're contaminating everything, it makes it a lot more difficult to narrow down suspects. And yes, I've heard all the rumors of there was this axe murderer on a train that would just randomly go through towns on a train and hop off and murder family and hop back on. So I totally understand. So when you were looking at all the evidence that you read about and researched, what was your feeling on the suspects that people were kind of throwing names out there in the town at the time?
I've gone through every single suspect in depth. Right off the bat, like everybody in town thinks F.F. Jones is state senator. So I wanted to know, why does everybody think that? Even Mary Peckham, who lived in this house, left to tell the grand jury what she heard, and she goes, I know F.F. Jones had something to do with this. And the guy overheard her and said, you better be careful with that. Jones came from New York City. So right off the bat, New York City, it's like small Iowa town.
Yeah, right.
He takes over collections of the bank. And before
Okay.
Jones, it was maybe next year's crops will be better. We'll work with you. He's like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't pay, I'm taking your collateral. He makes a fortune, builds the biggest house right on the corner in town. All the farmers thought that was him flaunting their losses in their faces. They just hated this guy.
Yeah.
I've talked to senior citizens today of you'd see Jones walking down the street, you'd go to the other side. Sounds like a you problem to me. You know,
Right.
like, or Jones wouldn't look you in the eye. That's a sure sign of guilt or anxiety or OCD or autism or
Right.
sounds like she killed people.
Yeah, he just doesn't like you.
Right. And I've thumbed through his Bible where he's highlighting love thy neighbor, stuff like that. Jones was state senator. He also owned a farm implement store. People said, oh, Joe Moore worked for Jones and started his own farm implement store. This farm store was a side hustle for Jones. He's trying to become governor. And Jones was so cocky. He's like, of course, Joe started his own store. I trained him, and I only trained the best. Game on, Joe. You know. So then it turned into Joe had an affair with his daughter, and she's pregnant. Well, she wasn't pregnant. Joe had an affair with his daughter-in-law, and his son was too big of a wimp to do anything about it, so he hired Blackie Mansfield to kill him. William Mansfield sued for defamation and got $3,000 back then. That's a lot of money. They didn't just give him that. They looked at every angle and realized we messed up. So Jones is out right off the bat.
Okay.
This killer from the train idea. I was kind of hot on that for a long time until I met the lady that wrote the thesis on that. She wrote the college thesis on it. She said she did it just for a fun idea. And she put it online, not even knowing why she put it online. Then she said all of a sudden there's a book out about it. Email saying, hey, we wrote this book based on your thesis. She doesn't even believe the thesis.
Oh, she just wrote a thesis. Hey.
Yeah, it's just an idea. Something, you know.
So, yeah.
But then I kept looking because I was like, it's got to be. There's so many similarities. It could be. Very well could be. I don't know. I'm not saying either way. But I do know Colorado Springs, Paola, Kansas, Monmouth, Illinois. These law enforcement agencies knew about this. They came here to meet with Villisca to see if it was connected, and they left going, probably not.
Okay. So the authorities that were working on the train murders, they came and saw that, I don't think this is the same. You don't have, this is our guy. He wasn't here type of thing. So
that was a gut punch for me. It's like, oh, they missed something. And I'm like, I had to check myself. I'm like, they were there, dude. Maybe you missed something, you know, which again, I want to be careful because I'm not saying, I don't know. I have no idea who did it. It could have been. Could have been Jones. Jones could have been riding a train with the killer. Could have been Carol Baskin. Who knows? You know.
That's the thing. Blame Carol Baskin.
I'm glad that joke still holds water a little bit.
Oh, it never gets old.
Right.
Well, the one thing that I thought was very peculiar about the murder scene, that all the mirrors in the house were covered with a sheet or a shirt or something. And the bacon wrapped in a cloth on the floor. Usually that's like a significant message. I mean, The Godfather, the horse head in the bed. It's not normal to leave raw bacon wrapped in a towel or a cloth on the floor in a room where two little girls are laying in their bed, mutilated and murdered. So finding those things in the house on the murder scene, what was kind of the police's theory? Like, were they using that as trying to find a motive or a suspect? Because to me, that seems like it's something that's very personal. They're trying to relay a message, but it's almost like they didn't want to do it, but they had to do it or something. I don't know. What was kind of the theories that the law enforcement were kind of milling around at that time with that evidence?
So I might break your heart with the bacon story.
Is it false?
Well, it was there. So the bacon wasn't even a thing until like 10 years ago when I hear somebody saying it's a sexual thing, and I was like, what? So Sarah Moore cured bacon, and back then you'd rub it down with salt, wrap it in cheesecloth, put it in a dark place to cure for a month. She didn't use the pantry because there was a window. She used that closet in mine and Lena's room to do that, and it was just found right outside the closet, so it wasn't even looked at as anything.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't placed there; it was just accidentally there.
Right, and
okay.
I tell people that have heard the stories of it being a sexual thing, and they look almost upset, and I'm like, sorry to ruin your excitement that it wasn't the sexual thing. What?
Oh, see, to me, I almost felt like it was a Hatfield and McCoy type of thing. Like, oh, did this the Moors, did they like take somebody's, pork stock or something like that? That was the message they were leaving behind. Yeah, okay, so that theory, that is kind of the bacon was there, but not for the reasons everybody thinks.
Right, and everybody talks about one of the Stillingers being molested. Not the case. That didn't come about till years after the fact, when the guy who owned the newspaper, who was an opium addict, said, no doubt the work of a sexual pervert. I mean, who else could do it but a sexual pervert,
Right.
And he said the guy did it naked with underwear on his head.
How would he know?
And I read this in the old microfiche machine, and I'm like, somebody should have talked to this weirdo. Like, what?
Right. Because how would he know unless he was there? Because that's a very specific thing.
She wasn't, her arm was up like this, and her leg was dangling off the bed. She didn't have a blood stain on her inner thigh, is right above her knee. Her underwear was missing. He'd wiped the blade of the axe off with them and threw them under the bed. Her sisters were folded up on the dresser, presumably where the other pair was. So it's like, this is 1912. You have like a pair for the week. You know what I mean? Like, hygiene was not what it is today. Like, it would have been customary to lay that stuff aside. And I think he hit them and just reached behind, grabbed, wiped it, threw it under, set the axe down, because it was just right next to the dresser. The mirrors being covered was very peculiar. Of course, at the time, they think a lot of superstition back then, and the idea of souls being trapped in mirrors. With modern forensics, we know that killers will cover mirrors because they don't want to look at themselves as a killer and see what they've done. I just say you can't rationalize crazy. It meant something to this person. What? Who knows?
Right.
Killing 8 people meant something to him. Sitting down and eating beans and bread at the table after he killed meant, like, this guy's not right. One of Sarah's nightgowns were torn in half, one over each front door. There was also, nobody talks about this, Ina and Lena's room had a door on it with an oval window cut out in the door. That was covered with a sheet. Like, you're in the house, you're going to find it. I've often thought, what if this guy had some kind of facial disfigurement and he didn't want to see that, and that's why he hit them in the faces only? I mean, it's a stretch, but who knows?
Well, when you look back at some of the historical cases, like of psychiatric care, for instance, I mean, the Elephant Man, they treated him like he was a sideshow, but they have like this weird self-hate when they're disfigured, whether it's from a fire or they're born that way, and a lot of times most humans, they like to deflect what they're feeling onto others, and that could very well be like he could have had something going on, and that could also be why he was covering up windows too, because if he knew if somebody saw him, he would be an easy person to pick out if he did have a disfigurement, like if he had, like half of his face was burnt or something like that. So that could be part of the reason why he closed all the windows and stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it's a very, like, to hit somebody in the face that many times with the blunt end of an axe seems personal. But these little kids didn't do anything to anyone. And if you had a beef against Joe, they had guns and knives back then. Find them in an alley. Like, you just pick the craziest weapon you can think of to kill somebody. And you went in and you're one scream away from total chaos in the house. Like, this is a precise blow to each person.
Yeah. Right.
And some people think it was one-handed because the house is pitch dark at nighttime. So how are you walking around and knowing where to hit? Did he have a lamp in one hand? And I mean, that's hard to do. Like, I can't do that.
Because one of the theories, I think they think that he was in the house already before they got home, and he hid up in the attic or somewhere in the house. Because I'm assuming that the door was locked. I don't know if they kept their door locked or if they just did that at night, but I know the door was locked when Rossmore was called over to use his keys. So the front door was locked. I'm not sure. Did police reports say that all of the doors were locked in the house, or was a back door left open or something?
So it was
when the guy got in the house.
It was unusual for people to lock their doors. This is what made people lock their doors in town. In fact, after this, the hardware stores ran out of door locks and window bars because nobody did it. And so they think that the killer took the house key on his way out. It's a skeleton key, could lock it from the in or out. In fact, Rossmore did not have a key to the house. He just had a bunch of skeleton keys and found one, kind of jimmied it open that fit. You know, very, very simple lock. So most likely the guy locked it on his way out. Was he hiding in the attic? That seems the most likable approach. If he creeps out, the exit from the attic is 5 feet from the parents' bed. Dad would have had to been first. He just boom on both of them to incapacitate them. There's a big pool of blood at the top of the steps where the detectives say he basked in his fiendish glory. I think he heard something and froze as the blood dripped off the axe. Maybe a kid's like, hello? And then waited for him to fall asleep. Went in, boom, boom, boom. The kids upstairs, went downstairs, got those two, came back, got them again, back downstairs again. There's a little evidence, evidence to that. Sarah's shoes were at the foot of the bed. Joe's hand was kind of like this, and the blood was pooling in his hand, ran into her shoe. But when they found the bodies, there's dried blood in the shoe, and the shoe was knocked over, dried blood under. So they think he knocked it over on a second turn.
Oh, gotcha.
So then that's when the blood went under the shoe instead of inside of it. As far as the kids, I mean, there's marks in the ceiling. There's marks on the side of the wall. He's going crazy in there. And in fact, in the kids' room, without being gross, like the blood splatter is like up like this from the beds. But there's also horizontal blood splatter around the room to where it looked like he took the axe and just swung it around like this as blood.
Wow.
Yeah. The guy's going nuts in there, basically.
Wow. That's very unnerving. Yeah. Obviously this guy was not psychologically sound at the time of this murder. We do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, you have some information that you have not even publicly shared yet. We're going to get the exclusive. So we're going to talk about that and find out what that new information is and how it's going to tie in, possibly giving more resolve, I guess, to the Villisca Ax murder. We'll take a quick break and I'll see you in a bit.
All right, folks. Summer is here, and the Paranormal 60 Swag Shop has all your supernatural summer must-haves. To comfortable, breathable tank tops for both men and women, to a paranormal investigator's must-have tool, a Bluetooth speaker for those EVP burst sessions that you want to do. Or you can hang out at a cemetery at night and rock out with the dead with some wicked, wicked tunes. And don't forget your Paranormal 60 sling bag, which you can carry all your summer stuff in while you're out and on the go. And don't forget our #1 seller, the travel mug. It's important to stay hydrated, especially in those dank and hot places y'all investigate, especially in the summer. All you got to do is go to paranormal60.com, click the swag shop tab at the top of the page, and then go to the Paranormal 60 collection, and that's where you'll find all your summer must-haves from the Paranormal 60 swag shop. And remember, kids, stay spooky.
Okay, and we're back. My guest, Johnny Hauser. We kind of alluded before the break that there was some news that hasn't been publicly shared that Johnny has, that he is going to exclusively share with us. So, Johnny, what is the new information that you have about the Villisca Ax murders and some new evidence or information that may shed some light on possibly solving this once and for all?
So it revolves around Reverend Kelly.
Okay.
I will say Reverend Kelly, with all the suspects, checks so many red flags, so many check marks on him. Like,
Okay.
he was here, this man from the train who, whatever, nobody even knows where this guy was. Kelly was 2 blocks up the street, right up here.
Okay.
He confesses to it. He tells people on the train before they find the bodies, turns in a bloody shirt to be dry cleaned, comes back inserting himself into investigations like he's a detective. Like guilty 101 with this guy right off the bat. He's schizophrenic for sure. He was hospitalized, labeled as schizophrenic, got out, tried signing up for the draft saying he was 30 and he was 60. So that didn't work out too well. There's strong evidence that he was possibly bisexual, which who cares? But back 100 years ago,
Yeah.
having that wrestling in his mind, his thoughts. And the only reason I even think about that is Jeffrey Dahmer is wrestling with that in the 70s, which the 70s, everybody was going wild,
Right.
But like 1912, a minister, So this old detective note has surfaced where a lady gets up to use her restroom in the middle of the night in South Dakota. Kelly's just sitting at her kitchen table. And she's like, hi, can I help you? And, time is being different. She's like, maybe this drifter needs a meal, So he starts going, how the killer in Villisca made a big mistake with turning in a bloody shirt to be dry cleaned, and how the killer has a compulsion to kill that he can't help. Therefore, we should all pity this guy, everyone. We should really feel sorry for him. And I'm like,
What?
Who's going to say we should pity a guy that killed 6 kids with an axe? None of my friends. And I'm like, one person is saying that, the one who did it.
I'm not a bad guy.
Not long ago, I had a lady in town that came up to me, older lady, and she said, did you know so-and-so? I'm like, no, I didn't. He was 100-and-some-year-old guy in town. He was he was an elder for the Presbyterian Church for over 60 years. And he said that decades ago, he had told her that right before Kelly died, they got a letter from him from New York City confessing to the whole thing, and they burned it. Now, I would have called it. They burned it. I would have just dismissed this because I hear a lot of stories. I've heard my grandma was supposed to walk home with him. Well, she's 60 and this was 112. Anyway, so there's 2 things that ring out in this. Nobody knew what ever happened to Kelly until we hired genealogists to track him down. They couldn't track him because he changed his name and occupation every single place he went to. So they backdoored it and tracked his wife to New York City. In fact, Dr. Epperly, Roy Marshall, who wrote books on this, didn't know that. And I told them, they're like, really? And he's buried in the Bronx out there. Like, here's all this stuff. So that checks out. And nobody would have known that back then. Now, the idea of they burn the letter, you're thinking, why on earth would they burn the letter? That's so stupid. So decades ago, going back to F.F. Jones, everybody in town hating F.F. Jones, thinking he had something to do with it. F.F. Jones is Methodist. The Moores are Presbyterians. There was such a divide in town, Methodist kids couldn't play with Presbyterian kids. F.F. Jones was fired from his own bank because they were afraid that he would divide the town's money because of this whole method.
Yeah.
So this big Hatfield-McCoy feud division in town finally ended. So the Presbyterians get this letter. Kelly's in hell, but burning for his sins. You know, do we burn this or do we reignite this feud again? It makes total sense. And those are a couple things that's come out, like I say, that nobody's heard of, and it just points right back to Reverend Kelly every single time.
I mean, with a confession too. I mean, and looking back on like what you were talking about, his persona, what he was going through at the time. It does fit like somebody who could literally just pop a screw loose and go ballistic.
Schizophrenia, not treated. And he also said he thought God was telling him to kill, just like God told him to burn those buildings in Nebraska. Later, they found in Sutton, Nebraska, where he was living and preaching, a bunch of buildings were burned. He just confessed to that.
Yeah, so it's almost like, he's using religion as a scapegoat to justify what he's doing. And you can't, that doesn't work. My God would not tell you to go murder and hack up an entire family for no reason. That's not
a
Christian thing to do.
I've interviewed schizophrenic nurses in depth. They all say that their schizophrenic patients, the voices they hear are very much what they're into. So like Kelly, being a minister, of course, it's going to be God.
Right.
Their schizophrenic patients that they said in particular are terrified of mirrors. I mean, there's everything with this guy. Like if he didn't, but I mean, there's a few things that lose me. He said he walked past the parents, killed the kids, then the parents. Moms have a radar. Like I can't believe he killed Sarah's 4 babies while she's 10 feet away sleeping. But then he said he wanted to take a nap, and that's when he found Ina and Lena. Like that's such a weird thing to come up with. I wanted to take a nap. It's so crazy.
No. I mean, you said like he was doing weird things, like going into the kitchen, and it almost was like he would have probably gone in there and made himself a sandwich in between, like waiting for people to, it just, the whole scene to me felt very schizophrenic, very chaotic. Like there was no planning to it. It was just kind of this raw, just uninhibited guy going ballistic on people. And that does fit like a schizophrenic, dementia, all that kind of encompassing bipolar. He could have been very well bipolar as well, but they didn't know about that back then. And psychiatric care was very minimal at that time. A lot of times they would just throw these people in a hospital and forget about them. So,
he said that a voice said, "Rise, Peter, slay and eat." He went for a walk, which is 2 blocks down the road right here. I saw a shadow. The shadow came out of the backyard, handed him an axe, and said, "I am the door." Followed the shadow in the house. Felt like he's led beyond his own control in a dreamlike state. Climbed Jacob's ladder to heaven, all this weird stuff. Ronald DeFeo said a shadow gave him the weapon, told him to kill. Felt like he's led beyond his own control. Like one of his a million confessions. It's changed a billion times, but 8 people killed in Villisca, 6 people killed in Amityville. The whole Native American burying ground at both places. There's no Villiscas anywhere on Earth. This is the only one. It's Waliska, which is Meskwaki for evil spirit. And Darwin told me 20 years ago, he goes, they'd bury their enemies in insane face down in shallow graves, so they were doomed to walk the earth. Darwin had a lot of stories. I'm like, okay, Over the weekend at Gettysburg Bash, I'm talking to a guy that was very much into Amityville, and we're just talking. He goes, there's native burying ground around Amityville. And he goes, they'd bury their enemies in insane face down in shallow graves. And my head about exploded. Like in 20 years, that's the second time I've ever heard that. So just the similarities are insane.
Right. And, when you have people too, and it's, let's say Villisca, and it is something that could be on the other side of the veil, something dark, malevolent, on the other side. A lot of times they will find the most vulnerable target to influence, and those are people with schizophrenia, people with depression, and things, people that are very vulnerable to, and that could very well be. I mean, a lot of people said Ted Bundy. There was times Ted Bundy would give off the smell of sulfur in the courtroom. All of a sudden they would smell sulfur. There was times they would say his eyes would change and his kind of like facial structure would change a bit. So, that you cannot discount the paranormal not influencing the living when it comes to things like this, because it is not in our nature to treat people and humans this way. No. And it's something very dark, whether it's just in the brain or it could be a mix of influences. It's obviously something is happening to these people to make them lose their, top and completely mutilate another human being, let alone 8 human beings, right?
1 week after the murders here, a priest is going down the road. He gets run off the road because a shadow crossed in front of him in Erling, Iowa, which is an hour from here, which kicked off a year-long exorcism in Erling, Iowa. And you can Google "Begone Satan" and read the priest's journal day to day.
Oh,
so that was 1 week after this. A shadow passed it. I want nothing to do with Shadow Man. I'm just putting that out there right now.
You stay in the shadows, dude. Don't come near me. Well, that is very interesting, and I would love to kind of start digging into the surrounding towns of Villisca and just see if there's any kind of weird correlations, and maybe just the whole state needs to be exercised.
So, like,
I'm Minnesotan, we do have Iowa beef, but
I've done that already.
Oh,
and like, I'll just go through a few quick ones. Woman is quilting and burns to death. How does that happen? Guy woke up not far from here, ate dinner with his family, went out, got a club, clubbed them all to death, sat on his front porch and proceeded to try and saw his own head off. A guy stabbed his wife in the town square, screaming, "She must die," in German. I mean, it just goes on and on. And our local drugstore, Stoner Drug, which is hilarious, but it used to be Honeyman Drug. They sold their own cold elixirs. And for a year, they advertised this in the newspaper. I'm going to bring it up just to show you. This was the name of the cold elixir made in Villisca.
Oh. Well, I don't want to consume anything with that number on it. You should see me at a store. If my price comes up to $6.66, I
pay an extra penny.
Pack of gum.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't like that number. Get it away from me.
I guarantee that had so much heroin and cocaine in it that.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like
back then.
This stuff goes on and on and on, and we could do 10 podcasts with all the weirdness.
Oh, we are. This should be a series, a TV series, just all the weird crap in Iowa that's all surround the Villisca Ax Murderer house.
Right.
Well, Connie, is there a website or anything that you're connected with?
Yes, if you go to www.ghostdaddy.com. That's a company I work for. We're developing ghost hunting equipment, all kinds of fun stuff. And then just me on all social medias is Johnny Hauser.
Yeah, and I'll have all the links in today's program description, link to the website, along with your social media links as well. Well, thank you so much, Johnny. This was interesting. And yes, I want to dig in all the weird crap in Iowa. Who wants to saw off their own head? That's not cool.
Right. Right.
Yeah. We're definitely going to have you back on. We're going to go over those. Well, thank you so much, Johnny. And thank you all for listening. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.